Okay, our next session is Achieve the Mission with Collaboration, Unlock Critical Data and Leverage the Data Cloud. With us is Bob Jeffcott, Principal Systems Engineer, Software AG Government Solutions, and Brandon Schultz, Sales Engineer, Snowflake Public Sector. Are you out there? I can see you both. We'll share the screen function here.
Thank you so much. Appreciate it.
Take it away.
Thanks, Mike. I'm here with my colleague, Brendan from Snowflake. My name is Bob Jeffcott. I am with Software AG Government Solutions. And we are going to talk a little bit about not only unlocking that data, but turning that data into knowledge. I'm going to start off and we're going to talk a little bit about the unlocking data portion, and then going to turn it over to Brendan to talk about turning that data into knowledge. And I do want to start off with, your current applications, your current systems have a wealth of data. But much like the pyramids, a lot of that data is hidden, locked, hard to get to, hard to decipher. A lot of valuable data, but not necessarily a wealth of information. But really, over time, your IT groups have turned that data into information. So you have reports, you have dashboards, you have some data warehouses that give you information about that data in a nice, neat picture, great format. It's easy to read, easy to understand. But really, it is just one view of that data. And as we're expanding, and as Jacob talked a little bit about, is doing a little bit more analysis of that, looking at trends, looking at changes in that data over time. Really what you need to do is to be able to turn that information and that data into knowledge, is to add perspective, to add new capabilities. So to turn that, we can add potentially context, new insights, new additional sources of data to give you a different picture of what really it looks like. So you're not looking at just that narrow little picture anymore. Now you're seeing, you know what, there is a bigger perspective, that maybe there are outside influences or outside things to consider. So that's really what we want to talk about today, is unlocking that data, making it more easily accessible, making it more easily manipulatable to be able to transform it. And there are varying levels of data in your enterprise, and transforming that data into leveraging it into Snowflake so you can do that data analysis. There's some that are easy, whether it be current cloud offerings today. Some are a little bit harder, those on-prem solutions, but still kind of a modern influence. And then of course there are the hardest, those legacy applications that residing on mainframes or iSeries or any of the older technologies. But again, a ton of information, a ton of data that resides out there. So let's talk about some of the challenges of getting that information into Snowflake to do that data analysis, and some of the ways to overcome that. So current approaches do nothing, right? What we have is sufficient. Challenges with that, though, is that key data is not included. I have a whole wealth of new data sources. Jacob talked about leveraging private industry information, leveraging outside data sources, and Brendan's going to talk a little bit about the availability of outside information to leverage to combine with your with your organization's information to give you a better perspective. Some customers actually do a bespoke custom look. I have these extracts that I've written against the mainframe, against my legacy software. The challenge with that is things change all the time, right? You're adding new fields, new values get put in, new applications get put in. So, those take time, effort. When they break, you're limited in your data access when things break. And of course, there are the traditional ETL type tools. You know, they're expensive, they're complex, they require a level of governance that maybe you know, prevents you from getting that data. So there are ways that people are taking approaches, and really today there are challenges with all those different approaches. So we're going to talk about a new way of getting that data out of its legacy systems, out of its current applications, into a usable format for data analysis. And let's talk a little bit about some of the challenges of connecting to the data, exposing that data, pushing it into a data source, and then giving that access to your end user analysts. You have constant sources and API changes in that backend data. The storage layers change, technology is constantly changing. The formats of those data changes. Platform inversions. Hey, we have a new version of our ERP. We have a new version of our data warehouse, all those formats. We call this term data drift. Unexpected, unannounced, and certainly unending changes. So that typically breaks those traditional extract and push data solutions. So we want to look at how we can visualize the data, move the data, transform that data into a useful format to get it into your data analysis hands. So really it's transforming that data into knowledge in 3 steps. First, you have to be able to view what's available. What data sources do I have? How can I access them? And one of the important things about that view is not looking at it in its native format. You know, oftentimes the data sources are cryptic. They're not understandable to your typical data analysis person. So what you want to do is translate that into something understandable, something, you know, in human terms as opposed to the more technical terms. And you want to be able to explore that data. What does it look like? What's the underlying in those data sources? What do I really care about? So that's that data virtualization, you know, exploring and virtualizing data across multiple different data sources. And then finally deciding, how do I want to move that? Do I need to move that in a batch? Do I need to move it as a change data capture? Do I need a constant stream of information? So I'm getting the most current data that matters to me. I'm not necessarily getting outdated data or matching outdated data with current data. And how do we do that? So once you have all that, you want the ability to be able to put in end users' hands, not having to rely on the IT staff. So you want to be able to orchestrate that data, transform that data, orchestrate it into a final solution that you're going to push into your data analysis tool, you know, in this case, Snowflake. And we want to talk a little bit about the capabilities for these types of transformations, because there's some concerns that we always have when we're talking about agency data. Hey, I have some sensitive data. I want to make sure that that data is safe, secure before it gets put into Snowflake. We can do that through tools like masking of information. And I think there was a question about the AI kind of concepts about data analysis. So, you know, one of the things that people are starting to look at is, you know, sensitive data may be hidden in some data formats. So you want to be able to do things like PII evaluation. Let me score this. Does it look like a social security number? Does it look like a credit card number? Does it look like some sort of sensitive information? If it does, I want to be able to alert that. And our StreamSets tool allows you to do all of those 3 sets. It allows you to do that connection safely, securely. It allows you to do the evaluation, the transformation, and finally the connectivity. And we want to talk just a little bit about our architecture just to understand that. So with that, we have our data collector. We collect from whatever that data source is in whatever time frame it is, whether it's batch, whether it's change data capture, whether it's an extract on a schedule. And it does all the automatic translation. So things like EBCDIC to ASCII, fitting all of the different security levels. It gives you that ability to do that search, presentation, rationalization, formatting, defining when you want to do it, and then finally doing those shaping of the data to do lookups to make that data enhanced, to use external data sources, to parse and merge, to finally deliver that. Now, one of the challenges we always hear is, I want my data safe, secure before it gets off my premises into Snowflake. And Brendan will talk a little bit about the Snowflake capabilities with its safety, its security. But one of the things you want to do is to be able to not have to worry about the management of this stuff. So our control hub, all those things we talked about, setting up connections, setting up transformations, all that's done in the cloud. You don't have to worry about versioning. You don't have to worry about, you know, the latest and greatest version of the software. But that data collector, that data movement can either be on your cloud, in our cloud, or it can be on-prem. So you guys get to decide how that data is manipulated, accessed, and delivered to Snowflake, so it can be done safely, securely, efficiently through your systems. And it's just part of our connected world. So we connect integration not only of data, but applications, of IoT, and of processes. So it's not only just that raw data that can be pushed into Snowflake, but it can be all those other components of your enterprise. And I want to leave you guys until I turn it over to Brendan in the immortal words of Emil Faber, knowledge is good. And for those of you that do not know Emil and where this came from, this was the opening scene from Animal House back in 1978. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Brendan to talk a little bit about how you get to that point of knowledge. Brendan?
Thanks so much, Bob. Appreciate that, and thank you all for joining today. My name is Brendan Schultz. I'm a sales engineer in the public sector team here at Snowflake, and excited to talk to you about the Snowflake Data Cloud. So next slide, Bob. So Snowflake is offered as a software as a service data platform that supports a variety of workloads and use cases. It's offered as a fully managed and integrated platform. We pride ourselves on being easy to use, having it just work out of the box. It enables customers to use their existing tools and applications, so leveraging StreamSets and others from Software AG's portfolio to help bring data into the platform and do the many things that those applications do. And then on the consumer end, bringing your technologies that you have for dashboarding or others. We operate in a pay-as-you-go use, so you build by the second for what you use, and I'll get into our architecture with leveraging the compute and the storage we have. And then a couple key highlights of the Snowflake. We were the largest IPO in software history just a couple years back, fastest software company to 1 billion in revenue, and a tremendous customer satisfaction rating. I highlight these things not to boast or brag, but to show this was primarily driven off of our commercial practice. Our public sector team here at Snowflake is fairly new as it relates to the commercial practice at Snowflake, and certainly new to the other technologies that have been around the public sector for a very long time. And we're really excited to bring this momentum that we see in the commercial sector and the private sector to the public sector. We have a couple certifications coming that will help open new opportunities for us, but we're just really excited to take the momentum we're seeing in the private sector and bring it to the public sector. So we met with a large federal agency the other week, and they talked to us about this 80-20 ratio that they were seeing in their data and analytics practice. What this 80-20 ratio was that their data and analytics folks were spending 80% of their time finding data, wrangling that data, combining it, and getting it ready for any value add analytics, and only 20% of their time on value add initiatives, on insights that they could get from that data. And the whole conversation was focused around their goal of inverting this ratio so that 80% of their time was spent on value add insights off of their data, and only 20% of their time was spent managing technologies, managing data, and getting it ready for analytics. And we were really excited about that. That certainly wasn't the only time we've heard of this concept, but it certainly goes to the way that we operate at Snowflake, is trying to make it as easy as possible for organizations to get the most out of their data. And Snowflake, being a managed platform, a managed service, and an easy to use tool, really drive this home in all of our customers, is being able to have them focus on data and not focus on the infrastructure. So, next slide, Bob. So, we've talked about silos. I've heard data silos come up in a couple previous conversations already today. It's not a new problem. Data silos have been around for forever and continually pop up today. And at Snowflake, at Software AG, the focus on breaking down your data silos and opening up new use cases by combining data and having it ready for your organization to use is key to that 80-20 flip, right? Data silos is a huge driver in why organizations spend a huge amount of time just trying to find and get to the data that they need, and only 20% of their time driving value. Being able to knock down data silos is a huge piece in flipping that ratio. And so introducing the Snowflake Data Cloud. So Snowflake sits in between your data sources and your data consumers driving insights out of your data. We rely heavily on our partners like StreamSets and Software AG to help us, especially ingesting data from all the various sources. StreamSets is a fantastic tool. It's funny, I was going to put in a slide very similar to what Bob had about the challenges of an IT infrastructure with all the lanes and hoops that some infrastructure can be set up with. And by putting Snowflake in the middle and leveraging tools like StreamSets, it really helps organizations get the data that they need into a place where they can start to drive really great use cases. And the workloads that Snowflake supports, there's traditional workloads around data warehousing and data lake. And then there's other core workloads like collaboration, which I'll dive into today in the spirit of unlocking data and achieving the mission. Data engineering, cybersecurity, like creating a cybersecurity data lake, data science, machine learning, and applications, which is a huge area of investment of our product right now, expanding capabilities in the data science, machine learning, and application space. So how does this work? So what does it look like under the covers? So our Snowflake architecture is really kind of core to the whole platform. It's when you start to understand the way Snowflake is built, you really get a good appreciation of how the platform operates and how we can offer some of the capabilities that we do. So I'll build this architecture from the bottom up. So starting with our cloud agnostic layer, we operate across the three major cloud providers, AWS, Azure, and Google, and we operate the same across those clouds. And you can choose one or all of those clouds to run your Snowflake environments on. And what that enables organizations and agencies to do is to enact a multi-cloud strategy. And more and more in conversations have we been hearing agencies wanting to have a multi-cloud strategy, and Snowflake is positioned to enable that. It's the same experience, it's managing the same data across the clouds, and that really has been prominent in conversations more recently. Up from the cloud agnostic layer, you have your centralized storage. So this is bringing all that data in from those data sources, leveraging StreamSets to bring this data in, whether it's unstructured data, semi-structured data like JSON or Parquet or Avro or other semi-structured formats, and of course your structured data as well. Bringing it into one platform, we take your data and apply industry-leading compression on your data and then store it. So we give you that benefit of compressing your data before storing it in the cloud, and then moving up a layer into the compute. So this, when Snowflake came out in 2014, our architecture fundamentally changed the way that data platforms, especially traditional on-premise data platforms, operated. And we did that by separating out the storage and compute. So traditionally, storage and compute is coupled in a data platform. We completely isolated storage and compute. And what I mean by that is this compute layer that you see with these gearboxes, these are only on when you need them. And when you don't need them, they can completely go away. So that middle ring there can completely disappear, and you're not paying for any compute, you just have your storage. And what it also enables you to do is each of these gearboxes can represent a different workload that you have. So say you have some BI dashboards that need compute power to work off data to present insights, or you have a data science team that's training a model that you're able to deploy, or maybe you have transformations going on in data that is ongoing. Each of those workloads can be separated across these compute blocks. And what that allows you to do is, one, you're all working off the same exact data. So you're all working off the same live data, but you're not competing against each other for resources. So you're able to right size those compute clusters to what you need. So let's say your data science workload is about to train the model and send billions of records through to train. You can adjust your cluster size for that particular workload up as you need. And then once you don't need it, you can automatically suspend it off. Same thing with like BI dashboards. If you think about the trends through the day of peak hours with multiple people hitting a dashboard at the peak time, and then spinning it back down and off as those users go away. And then maybe some of those transformations happen overnight or ongoing. It really gives you this elastic capability of managing your data platform. But as complex as that can sound, this is all done for you with just a couple clicks, a couple commands. It's all behind the scenes in terms of going to get the clusters, provisioning them, tuning them, putting them in the right size. It's all a couple clicks of a button and really, really easy to do, which is, again, the kind of driving factor for why we've been so successful in so many accounts. And then the last layer here is just our intelligent infrastructure. So this is kind of the glue that brings it all together. Like this is what you interact with when you use Snowflake. This is what manages the security and governance of your data. The data is always encrypted in Snowflake. It's encrypted at rest, encrypted in transit. The metadata about your data, and then the sharing and collaboration of your data, which I'll go into now. So data sharing. I won't spend too much time on the left side of the slide. I think we all have an appreciation of how hard it is to share data. Whether that's copying data and moving it somewhere, creating more silos, losing governance and transparency into what's going on. So using our unique architecture, Snowflake approached this problem differently than the way traditional methods have in terms of sharing. The way Snowflake allows organizations to share data is by enabling that organization to keep complete control and governance over their data. We actually don't move your data at all. It stays within your account as a provider. And the way it works is, as a provider, you create a share of data that's in your account. It could be you're sharing a database, you could be sharing a data table, you could be sharing rows of a data table, columns of a data table. You can mask columns. You can get really granular about what you want to share. And when you're ready to share data, you basically give a consumer account, a consumer Snowflake account, read-only access into your data. Your data never moves. Your consumer now is seeing your data. It looks like a normal data table in their environment, so it looks like just another database in their environment, and they're able to access the data that you've given them to the level that you've given them without you needing to move or lose any control or governance over your data. And what's great about that from a provider perspective, you still have access to your data and complete control of it. You can revoke, you can add more, you can do whatever you like in terms of collaboration, but you also get the transparency into what's going on with your data. So you can see across all your consumers that you've shared data with, what are the most popular things they're looking at? And you can really see trends of analytics within your data. And then on the consumer side, the great part about it is that you are querying live data. You don't have to create ETL pipelines. You don't have to have the overhead to maintain that. It's not a copy that becomes stale and ungoverned. You are querying live data. As the provider updates it, so does the results of your query. And it's all done with just a couple clicks of a button. And if you think about when I talked about separating storage and compute, the provider only pays for the storage of that data, and then the consumer comes with their own warehouses, with their own compute to run. So you get the best of both worlds, from a provider only needing to store the data and the consumer not needing to pay for any storage, just paying for the work that they need to run their queries on. So you can share data in a couple different ways. You can do a direct share, which is what I was just referring to, kind of a one-to-one account share. You can also create data exchanges, and this is creating a data catalog within your organization to have multiple parties post data assets, make it discoverable, make it collaborative. You could do this within your organization. You could do this with a subset of partners as well. But you can create an awesome place for people to come and discover assets that they could use to enrich their own data, or post data that they think could be helpful to others. And then lastly, the public marketplace. So Snowflake maintains a public marketplace where we have many providers posting hundreds of data assets out there. Many of them are free, which you can click and add into your account in a couple of seconds to start to enrich your data. One data set that really took off, especially in the public sector, there's this crazy thing called COVID-19 that happened a couple of years ago, and there was a huge demand to share COVID data and share it in a way that was live and up to date across government agencies, and then also with the public. So assets like that are posted to the public marketplace for any Snowflake account to discover and see. So when you have a Snowflake account, you have now access to tons of assets that are out there. Again, many free of charge that you can bring into your account and start to use. So what does this look like in the public sector? So first, just within one's organizations, within one agency, I'm sure you can think of many use cases where just their teams want to share data more efficiently. Their teams still want to control and govern the data, but they want to be able to share it with others and unlock new use cases. So we've seen a tremendous value just within organizations to share data. But going beyond just one's organization, we want to enable others out in their ecosystem to collaborate. So to Jacob's use case before, where the Department of Justice works with HHS and CMS, there's a great use case around having government agencies, and we've seen this really take off in some of our accounts, use this data sharing method to collaborate together on data that they haven't been able to before. And most of the time what we've seen is agencies are hesitant to share data because they don't think that the governance and control of their data is high enough, it meets a high enough bar to unlock that use case. And now with the way the Snowflake enables sharing, we give the provider the full control and governance over their data, where they are now comfortable to start to collaborate with others outside of their agency and unlock new use cases that they haven't before, whether that's with other federal agencies or if that's with federal agencies sharing down and back with the state and local government as well. And then lastly, just as I mentioned before, using the broader Snowflake marketplace to enrich your data with demographic data, public health data, economic data. There's so much out there that agencies are able to tap into to enrich their analytics just with a couple clicks from the marketplace. And to put this all in perspective, I'll kind of end with this. We've seen a tremendous growth in collaboration on our platform, and collaboration is just one workload of many that we support. But for this particular webinar about unlocking data and achieving the mission, collaboration is so key. And what you see in these two pictures, these are actual visual representations of sharing in Snowflake. So each dot represents an account, and each line represents a share between those accounts. You can see how much has changed in the past couple of years when it comes to data sharing in Snowflake. On the right-hand side, like those parachute looking figures, that's one really popular data set that's being shared to hundreds of accounts. So providers are now able to reach hundreds of consumers that they weren't able to before. And these consumers are now consuming very popular and valuable data sets that they don't have to worry about managing or maintaining. And in the government space, we see a lot of interest with the strong security and governance that we bring with collaboration to unlock new use cases, both within agencies and across agencies. So we're really, really excited to continue that momentum we see in the private sector into the public sector. Thank you so much for DGI for putting this webinar on, and for Software AG for partnering with us here. But we're really excited about what the future holds, and look forward to working with some of you on use cases that you have. So thank you very much.
Thank you. We have a few questions here. So I'll throw the first one out there to Bob. Is StreamSets a tool for data analysts or software engineers?
That's a great question, and it really is typically a collaboration between the two, but it really is also leveraging what your strengths are. The data collector, sometimes organizations are more comfortable having the IT staff collecting, setting up those connections, setting up the security mechanisms. But really then that gives them the free hand for their data analyst to say, well, I want this information. I want it in this time, this event time frame, etc. So it really is a collaboration, but it really is designed to let you leverage the strengths that you guys have.
Great. Okay, Brenda, I'm going to throw this one to you. How does Snowflake ensure governance throughout, especially when it comes to collaboration, as you mentioned throughout your presentation?
Yeah, absolutely. So first, any data in Snowflake has to be implicitly applied in terms of any access. You don't have access to anything when you get on the platform. Everything is actioned by the Snowflake user. And when it comes to collaboration, especially, the great thing about the way that Snowflake does collaboration is that providers never actually send data outside of their environment, outside of their account, where traditionally, when you copy and send your data elsewhere, you lose all visibility, you really lose control of what that consumer is doing with your data. When you keep it in your account, you're keeping all the governance and control that you want on that data without, losing that. So the way that we do that enables governance stronger than kind of what we've seen in the past with data sharing.
Yeah, and just to add on to that, I can attest to that. We did a demo in conjunction with Snowflake about 3 weeks ago, and we had our data, but it was not in the best of shape, and we wanted to share it with Snowflake because they could, present it a little bit better. And literally with like 3 clicks, we got them the schema, and then we were changing data until seconds before the actual demo. Worked great. Again, leveraging the strength. We took the Snowflake experts. They were able to display it, demo it, and with just a couple clicks of sharing.
Interesting. This one's going back to you, Bob. How do you ensure data is secure once it leaves the source? I think you mentioned that in your presentation. Can you elaborate on that?
Sure, and we did talk about the mechanisms that are there to do it, whether it's encrypting the data in flight, whether it's doing data masking, whether it's doing evaluation for sensitive data. But as we talked about the first time, you could maybe give these tools to the IT analyst. How do you ensure that they leverage those tools, right? So one of the things with StreamSets is you can put in your own guardrails, saying if you're going to make this connection, if you're going to push this data into Snowflake, you absolutely have to include in all of those streams a PII or an encryption or a data masking. So there are guardrails that, again, that IT staff can put in to say you have to have these steps to ensure data integrity, data security.
Okay, this will be the final question. I'll throw it out to you, Brendan, and then chime in, Bob. How does Snowflake scale to meet the increased workloads with this collaboration?
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you for that, Mike. So if you think about back to that rainbow architecture that you saw, that middle layer, which was all those gearboxes, those workloads, you can scale that up as much as you want. The beautiful thing about how the architecture is constructed is that you can scale those up and down as your organization grows. So when you're consuming data, so if you're a consumer of a data collaboration asset and you want to use it in a wide variety of workloads, you can spin those clusters up as far as you want and bring them down when you don't need them. So from a consumer side, the platform is super elastic and enables you to grow. And then on the producer side, the great thing about how we collaborate is when you share your data, all you're doing is giving another account read-only access into your data. And as a provider, you're not on the hook for any consumption of that data. You're really just providing the data as an asset for some people to come and query. And then all of the other consumers bring their own compute to it. So it scales really well because the consumers are the ones bringing their compute. And as a provider, you're really just servicing up that data asset to others. So it works really well from both a provider and a consumer standpoint.
Okay. Well, Brendan and Bob, thank you very much for joining us. We appreciate it. Excellent presentation. We're going to go to our first poll question today. This is your opportunity to schedule a follow-up discussion with a subject matter expert from Software AG and Snowflake on unlocking data and leveraging the data cloud. This is your opportunity to say yes. To speak with probably Brendan or Bob, or you can respond not at this time.